Welcome back, everyone. We get to talk about another gaming console this time around, and it is none other than the original PSP. Now, this console, I was more of a Nintendo boy when I was growing up. I had a Nintendo DS, but I was almost always jealous of the original PSP and just what it was, what it brought, and the graphics behind this thing, the capability, the modding capability, the fact that this thing had an actual internet browser and a store you could download stuff from. That was beyond me. Nowadays, we kind of understand okay, this is a basic console. There's emulators that can run these games too, but these games and these graphics were actually so important. And honestly, when you look at the consoles nowadays, but more importantly, when you look at the emulator space, PSP games are some of the, anytime I watch an emulator video of certain devices being tested on certain emulators, they always use PSP because these graphics are really intense. And it's a great blend between stability of the graphics, stability of the gameplay without having to use too many resources, and just having it as a very solid console. So I wouldn't probably recommend picking up the original PSP if you actually want to go ahead and play games on it and everything. But if you actually want to go ahead and pick it up as a collector, or even if you want to just have it plugged in and play games and stuff, then by all means, The only problem is a lot of these gaming consoles are becoming more expensive, especially in the used game market for collectors and all those other things. So you may be better off if you just play them a different way, but this is still a really good console. Now, funny enough, this console was originally announced during E3 of 2003, but it was eventually actually unveiled on May 11th, 2004. And then slowly it came out in a couple of other areas by 2005. Now, this was a very interesting console because this was around the same time that the PlayStation 2 came out and the PlayStation 3 came out. So the PSP lineup was there for pretty much those generations, which was very cool. And then eventually we got the PS Vita that was there kind of during the PlayStation 3, end of the PlayStation 3, beginning of the PS4s. And with something like the PSP, this thing was very beautiful. Design-wise, this thing was so iconic in so many different ways. On the front though, you had a beautiful display. And at that moment, nowadays whenever I pick this thing up, it obviously doesn't look that great. It doesn't look ugly, but the panel is kind of small compared to even phones that we have nowadays. All of our phones have pretty much bigger screens than this console. But at that moment in 2004, 2005, there really wasn't much going for those types of devices. You had to have, your phone, and then you had to have a dedicated portable console at that time, which was kind of funny. Now we had a bunch of buttons on the front. We had that analog stick, which was very cool and nice touch. And that was something I was also jealous of. As an owner of a DS, I really liked having that on a PSP, which was cool. You had the arrow keys on the left side. You had the actual buttons on the right side. You had the left and right triggers up top. And you had the volume buttons, home buttons, some other buttons on the bottom of this console too. And overall, the front of this device, and overall, the front of this console still looks very beautiful, looks very minimalistic, and it's held up so well during the last several years, to be honest. This thing is approaching over almost 20 years old or whatever, 19, 18 years old, and it's crazy that this thing is still this relevant, in my opinion, just from a design-wise. Now, we did have a rechargeable battery on this thing, and it was easily removable, which was cool. On something like the DS, we didn't really have a removable battery. You could remove it if you want to. And I'm talking about the DS Lite, not necessarily the original DS. And I will tell you, with something like this, still completely relevant. You can still, I wish we had more things where we can remove and then add and stuff, but it's whatever. Now, the weirdest thing about this console was actually the SD card, or this, slot that we used for that, memory card. Now, this thing used that Memory Stick Pro Duo or something like that. Very, very weird. With the DSi and DSi XL a couple of years later, we actually ended up getting SD card support. But for pretty much all of the PSPs that ever came out, you actually had to use a dedicated memory card for this thing. You couldn't swap it out with pretty much anything else. I think there were some Sony cameras that used this, proprietary memory card, but this one you couldn't, and that was kind of weird. I didn't really like that. I still don't really like it. I tried to modify my PSP not too long ago, and I had to go and buy a dedicated memory card for it. It's crazy. I think the PS Vita fell in the same suit as well, but this one, I feel like Sony makes so much money from their memory cards, let alone from the console, so that was pretty crazy. Now, feeling this thing in the hand, it still feels really good. It doesn't look old, it doesn't look dated, it just looks like a PSP. I think that's pretty much the best way to put it. Now, as most of you know, we did end up getting the PSP 2000, 3000, the PSP Go, the PSP Street, the PS Vitas, and the PSP Go, I think I already said that twice, and that was pretty much it. That was kind of the ending of the portable console from Sony. I hope they make another portable console, but I think in the body standpoint it's beautiful, but turning this thing on, that was even crazier. This console, in my opinion, had the best UI of all time, and when I actually looked at the PSP and I looked at something like the PS3, I was just dumbfounded. I was like, why would you even need to buy a PS3 when you can just buy a PSP and have it go with you everywhere and all sorts of stuff like that? I mean, that was really cool. And obviously this thing was more based off the PS3 than the PS2, but there was still a lot of overlap. I was certainly so surprised. I don't know why I said certainly. I was so just surprised about the gaming selection that the PSP had, but just going through the menus and everything, that was so cool, and I was just such a huge fan of it. Now, with something like, the PS3, that thing had more power, that thing had more capability, but when you looked at the menus, that was the thing that threw me off the most. How iconic is the menu on the PSP? I mean, I think everyone who grew up in this kind of time frame was just so mesmerized by something like this. The fact that you can bring a console with you on the go that was this powerful was super crazy. I felt the same exact way with the DS Lite whenever I looked at even kind of Wii graphics, but when I looked at GameCube games, I was like, wow, you can play Mario Kart on the go with you. And that was so insane to me. And with the PSP, same exact way. But that's not even touching the game selection behind this console. There were so many games available for this thing. It was absolutely crazy. The thing though was that Sony at this time actually started not only, making a bunch of PSP games and everything like that, but they actually started re-releasing a lot of PlayStation 1 games on the PSP. And it was on the PSP that I actually finished all the Crash Bandicoots, that I finished pretty much all the Spyros as well. And that was awesome. I was able to do that on a portable console. Instead of trying to download an emulator and all that sorts of stuff, I could have just bought it on the PSP and have it go with me places, which was so cool. There were so many games available for this thing, and the graphics were amazing too. And that's something that a lot of people pretty much focused in on the PSPs. They wanted to get a console that had console-like graphics, and this thing pretty much had it, let alone the other capability. I mean, I've seen people modify PSPs and do the craziest things on them. I've seen them, have a fake iPod on them. I've seen people, play all sorts of emulators on these things as well. And just the modding capability behind a PSP was crazy. One of my tutorials from many years ago was still kind of doing some numbers. And it's funny, it was a PSP custom firmware trick or whatever. And that video is still getting views, which is so funny. That was 2018 and it's still kind of getting views now, which is crazy. And that just goes to show the capability behind this console and how much people were just so mesmerized by this thing. The fact that it's still somewhat relevant. And I think it really got helped out because they made it so easy to pretty much replace the battery. A lot of people end up, upgrading their consoles because of battery problems, hardware problems. But if you can alleviate one of those biggest issues, which is the battery, it can probably make for a long-lasting console. Now, in my opinion, I think the original PSP is still worth it. I think it's a great console. But like I mentioned, it just depends on what you're trying to go down for. Are you trying to basically get this console as something, to use on an everyday basis and actually take with you places and all that stuff? You're probably better off downloading an emulator and moving on that way. However, if you're a collector and if you're actually trying to go ahead and get a decent collection going, you're going to have a PSP, in my opinion. You can't have a collection and not have a PSP. You would have to have it, in my opinion. And this thing is a solid console. It has a lot of capability for sure. And I'm still a humongous fan of the PSP in 2022. So in terms of that pretty much covers it up. If you guys have any other questions or anything like that, let me know in the comment section below. Hit the like button, that would mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. More importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.